shock nuclear apocalypse in Belarus. Lukashenko has gone too far, Minsk couldn't handle it, set his sights on Kyiv, but ended up getting what he deserved. Will you be shocked? A new assassination attempt on Budanov. The mysterious general outplayed Moscow even in this situation. The Russians sobbed. Meanwhile, Putin's doubles have gone out of control. Beijing has finally exposed the dictator. The failure of the century, you have to see this. Trump has been officially written off politically. Washington has entered a zone of turbulence. The White House is exploding with news, the moment of truth. Moscow has lost the most important thing. The attacks on the oil refineries have finally put all the dots on the I's. All this in our episode Hellpoint. Urgently, Russia has shifted the zone of total failure now onto the territory of Belarus. A nuclear explosion that hits its own people. Putin promised Lukashenko that everything would be under control, but instead he set him up harshly. Everything went off plan, father. Apparently NATO is moving against Belarus. It seems a deadly missile has been launched, one that will kill his own. Tensions are rising and terrible things are happening near the border with Ukraine. How could this scenario actually end? Let's watch. The worse things get for the bunker dwarf, the more hysteria and fuss there is around the nuclear triad. The Russian Ministry of Defense has released a video showing training exercises of military units from the Strategic Missile Forces, the Northern and Pacific Fleets, Long-Range Aviation, and the Leningrad and Central Military Districts.
Prepare the submarine for navigation at periscope depth at course 6 with a 2-degree stern trim and sea state 2.
All this showmanship costs hundreds of millions of rubles. The Kremlin staged it all for one purpose, to convince everyone that the Russian army is ready to launch missiles. On the Russian Ministry of Defense's social media, a video also appeared from Belarus, where nuclear forces exercises are taking place. To the Republic, where, according to Lukashenko, Putin's notorious little nut has long been stored, nuclear warheads were brought to field training sites. In the video, in unknown forests, you can see soldiers bustling around a vehicle, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night, under flashes.
The sky was suddenly illuminated by brilliant flashes of lightning, and then just as quickly the entire landscape was revealed once again in the broad, clear light of day. Daylight. It's not clear, maybe someone has seen this in some stories. They underwent technical modernization at Russian factories. And there is also the Su-24M, which can also carry nuclear warheads. And there are the Iskanders, which can also, excuse my wording, fire nuclear warheads. So Lukashenko dreamed and dreamed ever since 1994 of bringing nuclear weapons back to the territory of Belarus. And why did he want this? In this way, to join the club of the top guys.
However, the potato Führer miscalculated. Friends from the Kremlin may hand over stocks of the nuclear triad, but they will keep the control button for themselves.
The control of nuclear weapons, if, again, they are located on the territory of Belarus, is carried out by the Kremlin, the General Staff of the Armed Forces of the Russian Federation, the relevant troops, and the armed forces. Therefore, the decision, the button, is in Putin's hands, not Lukashenko's. What does this lead to? Right now, these exercises are taking place on the territory of Belarus. They have put everyone on combat readiness. And we have to realize that those states, Western Europe, NATO countries, have now aimed their military forces at the territory of Belarus. They are aiming, watching very closely through their sights. So what will happen? They will not be indifferent to this. Maybe these aren't just exercises. Maybe it's something else. They have something planned. Putin and Lukashenko, maybe they really won't just be doing training, but will actually use nuclear weapons. Or maybe it's just an excuse. And that's why now all the sights are set on Belarus, including nuclear ones. And that means there's a target on the heads of Belarusians.
Representatives of the Belarusian opposition and analysts believe that these exercises are just a show, as if something is going to be launched somewhere.
He's a devoted sycophant to Alexander Lukashenko, known for his deep loyalty and constant support of the administration's policies within the current political landscape. A bigger bang, something like that. And a report saying that we've achieved our goals, we have the best army in the world. Well, okay, the second best after the Russian army. But what's a bit concerning is the scale of these exercises. First, and also the fact that previously there were no joint nuclear exercises between Russia and Belarus. That's the second thing. So Russia used to conduct although on a smaller scale, but they did conduct such exercises from time to time. And Belarus, in principle, was never involved in them. Personally, for me, this represents yet another significant step in that specific direction. The gradual and concerning loss of Belarus's national sovereignty is clearly moving towards its full inclusion in this newly established joint defense district alongside Russia. Let's describe the situation in that particular way to understand the gravity of the current geopolitical shift. That is to say, even in the event that we do not possess our own nuclear weapons, but we participate as an active part of these military exercises, and we are essentially being exploited and utilized. Us, the people of Belarus, Belarus as a strategic territory, and the Lukashenko regime itself, which is also being used by the Kremlin for its own ends. This once again demonstrates just how little genuine sovereignty and independence there truly is today.
Belarus as a state.
Recently, the hysteria surrounding a potential war in Belarus has reached a fever pitch. Lukashenko is openly telling Belarusians to prepare and hasn't taken off his military uniform. The forests along the borders with Ukraine and NATO countries have been closed to visitors, even to local residents, under the pretext of fire hazards. I
hope, and more likely this is how it will be, that Russia will use Lukashenko as its own pet madman. Analysts
do not rule it out. Putin might dare to strike one of the NATO countries. In favor of such a decision are for now the weakness of Europe and the indifference of the United States, as well as the fact that the window of time for an attack is not all that large. To help, the bunker dweller can once again use threats of nuclear weapons on the territory of Belarus. By the way, according to analysts, Russia always conducts large-scale nuclear exercises in October, and the only time the schedule was changed was in February. In 2022, the Kremlin checked its nuclear stockpiles before invading Ukraine.
His name alone sparks panic in Russia, the Kremlin's worst nightmare and the terror of Russian generals. Kirill Budanov remains target number one personally for Putin. A new assassination attempt, the hunt of the century broadcast live, and once again they can't handle him. Instead of a resounding victory, another failure and a new wave of fear among the Russian elite. How Kyiv delivered a devastating preemptive strike that wiped out all of the Kremlin's plans? And why? After this, did people in Russia start talking about the complete disruption of their most secret operations? Details coming up.
Are you really being hunted? I like it.
In recent years, he has survived numerous assassination attempts.
How many assassination attempts have you survived? Honestly, I don't even know. That's the honest answer. I don't know the exact number. Definitely more than 10. Frankly, I think around 20.
The head of the president's office and one of Ukraine's main negotiators in talks with Russia, Kirill Budanov, remains one of the Kremlin's primary targets.
Of course, he really is probably one of the main targets for Russian attacks, simply because he stands out on the one hand. The continuation of Ukraine's struggle for independence, effective operations by Ukrainian special services, and, in principle, a rather tough negotiating stance.
Budanov headed the main intelligence directorate from August 2020 to January 26, after which he was appointed head of the president's office. During this time, he became one of the main organizers of Ukrainian special operations against Russia. As noted by The Times, Budanov has close contacts with the CIA and is considered one of the key figures in Ukraine's security system. Among the well-known assassination attempts, the publication recalls the 2019 incident when a bomb planted by a Russian agent exploded prematurely under Budanov's car. And in 2024, the Security Service of Ukraine reported a foiled attempt to strike his motorcade with ballistic missiles, also involving Russian agents. And in 2023, according to Ukrainian intelligence services, Budanov's wife, Mariana, and several intelligence officers were poisoned with heavy metals. Russian intelligence services are not stopping and continue their attempts to eliminate Kirill Budanov even during negotiations to end the war.
Budanov is a negotiator of a new generation and a negotiator who is usually different both from early Ukrainian negotiation traditions and from the negotiation traditions of the modern West, where there is a tendency to appease the Russians and the Russian dictator. Budanov is not like that. He is ready to negotiate. He never refuses to negotiate, but he is always in favor of conducting them from a position of strength, and that is the most important thing. In other words, Budanov is the kind of negotiator who does not appease Putin, but puts pressure on Putin.
In an interview with the British publication The Times, Budanov stated that he does not find it strange that the Kremlin continues to hunt for him. Moreover, he said that he considers such attempts absolutely normal, given his previous activities as the head of Ukrainian military intelligence.
I absolutely don't have to trust anyone. I have to achieve results. And to achieve results, any means, forms, or methods of work are acceptable.
One thing is clear, no matter what, Budanov definitely won't be left alone. And Russia will not stop at its failed attempts to eliminate him.
In Russia, they clearly understand that just like with Zelensky, they can't pressure Budanov into submission. That is, they can exert some pressure, but they can't break them. And so, of course, from the perspective of the Russian imperial idea, this hatred toward everyone who stands in the way of that idea, naturally, they would gladly achieve the elimination of both Zelensky and Budanov. Budanov is especially valuable in this regard, since he combines both military functions and the role of a political leader.
One of the representatives of Ukraine's leadership. And at the same time, he is associated with many of the successes achieved by Ukrainian special services in recent times.
Putin's double was caught live on air in shock. Now the bunker dweller is afraid to let his copies out into the world because they ruin everything. The last straw was the visit to Beijing. Did the pseudo-bunker dweller fail? You have to see this with your own eyes. The head of the Kremlin, trapped in the vice of his own fears, while real threats have crept up behind him. Shocking revelations that send chills down your spine. Could it be that the era of the clans is over? And is it time for the real bunker dweller to face danger head-on? Let's watch.
Xi Jinping won't give Putin money for the power of Siberia.
Misha, rewrite everything. Your face looks boring. No one is going to give you any money.
Perhaps in the case of the Russian dictator, Xi didn't give money not because of a boring face, but because the face wasn't Putin's at all, but that of his double. Adding fuel to the fire. Adding to this is the fact that the Russian dictator has already been caught before using body doubles during official meetings with the leader of China.
By the way, he slipped up at the airport with Chinese representatives and he greeted these diplomats with his left hand, but when meeting Xi Jinping, he used his right hand. Although we know that Putin's right hand was practically non-functional. He used it very, very little for gestures.
The foundation for discussing Putin's possible doubles is the bipolar behavior of the Russian dictator. On the one hand, Putin is a paranoid who meets with foreign leaders and his own ministers at a cannon's distance.
Of course, I understand. We share concerns about what is happening in the security sphere in Europe. Colleagues, good afternoon. We have gathered here today to discuss the situation that is unfolding in Donbass.
On the other hand, the same dictator who is afraid of germs, viruses, and enemy intelligence agents sometimes displays an unprecedented bravery for a bunker prisoner.
Here is this part of the canvas. It collapsed. Where are we now? Yes. Do we live in an apartment? I have the second floor, they have the first floor. Do you like it? Yes, of course.
What started as an internet meme about the existence of Banquet Putin, the Chatterbox, and the Udmurt against the backdrop of a large-scale war with Ukraine and, as a result, threats to the dictator's life, has turned into reality.
His visits to the occupied South are a complete setup, and a poorly and hastily organized one at that. And it wasn't Putin who took part there, but his double. There is a very big difference in behavior and appearance. In terms of behavior, among other things, he would never have gotten into that vehicle. And in this manner, he would not have interacted with the so-called local population, because we understand that even for his own people, access to the real Putin in the Kremlin is already very limited.
In an interview with The Sun, the use of body doubles by Putin for his own security was confirmed by former head of British intelligence MI6, Richard Dearlove. According to the former intelligence officer, the use of body doubles is essentially standard practice for dictators like Putin.
Ukraine is demonstrating the ability to strike deep into Russian territory. This increases the Kremlin's concerns about Putin's vulnerability, especially outdoors or in loosely controlled environments.
Ukrainian intelligence believes that there are at least 3 Putin body doubles in Russia. Candidates were specially selected to replace the dictator, chosen for their similar build, mannerisms, walk, facial expressions, and facial features.
Vladimir Vladimirovich, hello. I am a student studying at St. Petersburg State University. I want to ask, is it true that you have many body doubles?
After thinking about it very carefully, I have finally decided that the only individual who should ever speak in my own voice and look exactly like me is, quite simply, myself. And that person will be me.
But no matter how much you try with makeup, artificial intelligence can't be fooled. A few years earlier, the Japanese TV channel TBS conducted a study using artificial intelligence technology. Experts compared Putin's face and movements during various public events. On different photos and videos, the dictator's AI showed only between 53% and 18% similarity. The conclusion of the study was the existence of at least 2 Putin doubles.
A wave of shock and darkness swept over the USA. The most difficult stage for Trump has already arrived. This is being openly discussed. His position is rapidly weakening, political pressure is increasing every day, and the situation is getting out of control. Everyone has turned away from the politician. Impeachment is breathing down his neck. Will he be able to maintain control and see his term through to the end? This is the question the whole world is discussing right now. What will happen next? Don't miss it.
Donald Trump almost had a stroke. The American billionaire who so desperately wanted to write himself into the history of the United States as the greatest president of all time will be remembered by the world as one of the worst.
Thank you very much.
Trump's ratings are going down the drain. There can be no talk of a third term or any further successful political career. Many analysts claim that Donald will not be able to hold on to the presidency even until the end of his official term.
Here you can see that the rating has dropped to 37% in this poll. That's 2 points lower than the last time we conducted the survey. How is that time different from today? Of course, it's the beginning of the Iranian war, which is still ongoing. It seems this is hurting Trump politically.
Saying it hurts is putting it very lightly. The vast majority of people say that, in their opinion, the country is moving in the wrong direction. Many of them point to the economy, saying they are well aware of the price of gasoline and the price of groceries. And these are people, many of whom are working in the labor market. Ordinary Americans. More than half of Americans have a strongly negative attitude toward the war against Iran started by Trump, and toward the current White House policy. It was precisely the conflict between Washington and Tehran that became the last straw for voters.
He is waging a war that is extremely unpopular. 2/3 of the country either strongly disapprove or to some extent disapprove of what he is trying to do. These are not the conditions under which an American president can successfully lead a war.
As of today, even the most ardent Trump supporters disagree with the current president's policy. Even Tucker Carlson himself was shocked on the eve of what Donald Trump is doing.
And everyone else who supported him, you wrote speeches for him, I ran his campaign. We are definitely involved in this. It's not enough to just say, well, I changed my mind, or, oh, this is bad, I'm leaving. In fact, I and millions of people like me are the reason for what is happening right now.
Imagine the frustration of a dyed-in-the-wool American propagandist. He even dared to publicly apologize for once supporting Trump.
I want to say that I apologize for misleading people, and it was unintentional.
Even his own party has recently turned against Trump. Republicans and their voters are already fed up with the antics of the American billionaire.
A quarter of those who call themselves Republicans are in the camp dissatisfied with how the president is handling the Iran issue. This was the story of his second term: inflation and the rising cost of living.
Against this backdrop, talk of a possible impeachment is growing louder and more frequent. Mass protests and criticism over the economic situation and foreign policy are increasing the pressure on the White House. In these circumstances, the Democrats who have never liked Trump may try to use the president's declining support as a reason to initiate impeachment proceedings. And according to analysts, their chances are high. After all, more and more often, even Republicans are joining the ranks of those who oppose the current US president's actions.
Maximum alert in Russia. Russians understand that the situation is becoming critical. The fuel collapse in the Russian Federation is gaining momentum. Russian oil refineries are catching fire one after another. The situation is rapidly deteriorating. There is practically nothing left to cover up Putin's oil addiction, with confidential reports have leaked online. Top Z channels and the aggressor's war correspondents are sounding the alarm and almost unanimously talking about an impending large-scale crisis. More details ahead. There's another commotion in Russia. This time, everyone is in a frenzy over the situation surrounding the oil refineries. As they say, Ukrainian long-range sanctions are in action. It is
this precious oil that is the very needle of Koshchei, which, in fact, ultimately determines the future of the Russian nation.
Russians are especially concerned about the security issues around the oil refineries. This is reported by the Telegram channel Kremlin Tabakirka.
Sources in the government state that the security situation around oil refining facilities has significantly worsened over the past 2 months. And the trend, since the beginning of the year, is extremely unpleasant. The refineries continue to suffer. The supply of spare units has been depleted or is almost exhausted. The units are complex and critical. And the attacks continue, unfortunately, says the interlocutor.
At the same time, sources close to the Kremlin assure that a fuel shortage in Russia will be avoided, at least for the next few months.
However, this task, including for local authorities, is to already now reduce the demand from non-critical enterprises. Civilians are not advised to stock up on fuel in advance in order to prevent a sharp rise in prices. However, under conditions of reduced production, price increases are practically inevitable.
However, strikes on Russian oil and gas infrastructure and sanctions pressure have already created serious problems for Russia's economy.
All the income that Russia receives comes primarily from oil. Oil products, and to a lesser extent, gas. This is what allows the Putin regime to exist, to fund the military, to hire mercenaries, and to continue the war against Ukraine. And if, for example, Ukraine systematically targets Russian oil refining and oil transport infrastructure, as we are seeing now, in the end this will create a lot of problems for Russia. After all, this is quite complex equipment, which is not so easy or simple to repair, and most importantly, it will require money. In other words, what is supposed to generate revenue will instead bring losses.
Just in the past few months, Russia has lost about 10% of its oil refining capacity.
Just in these months. In these months alone, Russian oil refining is down by 10%. It is also important to note that Russian oil companies are being forced to shut down wells. This is even more significant. To restore production at Russian wells, much more needs to be done than in many other oil-producing countries that shut down wells simply in response to market fluctuations. Russians can't do that. For them, losing production is a real loss. This is truly very painful.
Moreover, due to the comprehensive pressure on Russia, the Russian budget deficit for the first 5 months of the year has already exceeded the figures Moscow had planned for the entire year. The Kremlin does have reserves to continue the war, but they are not unlimited.
Putin, of course, set aside money for the war, but definitely not enough to fight endlessly. Every one of our retaliatory strikes, every joint step we take with our partners, every step of pressure, all of this pushes Russia to end its war. Now, a significant number of their regions are already bankrupt, and Putin is leading Russia toward bankruptcy. And
Ukraine is not stopping there and continues to put pressure on the Russian economy and oil refining sector, and will keep doing so, and that is the right thing to do.
In Russia, the entire economy is essentially just a few pipelines and a few dozen oil refineries. And all of them are large. All of them are large, scattered across the entire territory of Russia, which means it is impossible to fully cover them with air defense systems. And if Ukraine continues to systematically take them out, sooner or later, they will run out of spare parts and money for repairs and ultimately, the Russian economy. Well, not that it will collapse entirely, but a significant portion of its income will be lost. This is all happening amid the general crisis of this very economy into which Putin has driven Russia.
President Volodymyr Zelensky, for his part, has already stated the effectiveness of Ukraine's long-range strikes on Russian territory. And he made it clear that Ukraine plans to intensify such strikes and has already approved the corresponding plans for June.
Today, I approved our long-range plans for June, and we need to creatively develop the Ukrainian long-range sanctions that demonstrated their strength in May. I am grateful to all our warriors for their accuracy.
That's all from me for now. This was me, Darina Hatsakalo, with you. Even more scorching news in our next episode. And in the meantime, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.